Welcome to Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths, cultures, and community leaders. We are very pleased today to have in the studio Sergeant Jim Gort, a man who is well known in this community, well known nationally in the United States of America and internationally for his experience and his activities pertaining to law enforcement. I am your host, Shafayat Mohammed, and again, it's a pleasure, and I want to thank you very much, Sergeant, for being with us on Al Hikmah TV.
It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
Well, I know you have a wealth of knowledge and experience, and you got the 9 yards of all the different experiences that you have had in law enforcement, especially after 9/11. I mean, you have been there. How many years now have you been in this field?
Of police or?
Police, whatever it is in law enforcement. Or
I've been a cop for just over 20 years, 19 of them here in Pembroke Pines. And I've been a sergeant since 2001, early 2001. And I've been just doing a whole bunch of other stuff after 9/11. A lot of training in anti-terrorism issues and dealing with the Muslim community and getting to know the Muslim community down here.
Good. I mean, just being a cop is an interesting thing.
You know what? It's the best job in the world, and the best way I've ever heard of police officer, being a police officer, it's a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, and it really, really is.
And you know, people are all excited about cops on television in America. You know, people all over the world, and Al Hikmah TV is viewed by viewers all over the world. East, Middle East, West, wherever. And you don't have many cops, and you wouldn't have many American cops being on an Islamic TV program. So we really, really appreciate you being with us and sharing your experience and your knowledge. And being what is called a sergeant for over 10 years of experience, plus your experience with JTTF. You want to tell our viewers what is JTTF and what were you involved in with that?
Sure. Well, after 9/11, many police departments, including the Pembroke Pines Police Department, saw a need to look into anti-terrorism efforts, anywhere from trying to find a bad guy to doing critical infrastructure assessments, quick response plans. So the chief and our city manager in the city saw the need for this. I was chosen to head up the unit, and I headed up the anti-terrorism intelligence unit within our police department. As such, I had a detective of mine assigned directly to the FBI JTTF in Miami, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I was assigned down there on a part-time basis. So we worked with them, with the FBI, very closely on all any issues that deal with terrorism-related issues.
So that was basically the mission. But what were some of the activities that, maybe one or two, that you experienced in those years?
Well, you know, we worked a lot of different cases with the FBI. A lot of stuff, obviously, I can't go into the dynamics of the case.
I understand.
But you know, some of the very interesting things that my job brought me, prior to getting involved with the anti-terrorism aspect of it, I didn't know. I had a couple of friends who I knew were Muslim, and I had nothing about Islam and nothing about the Muslim culture, the Middle Eastern culture, the Far Eastern culture. And once I got into the unit, I became friends with you, and I met you.
Well, I remember before becoming friends,
yes,
you gave me a hard time.
I did. I did.
I never forget the hard time you gave me. You were like, you Muslims are like this,
Yes,
you have no
I did.
mercy. Well, didn't you ask me a question? I think you had told me, you said, I'm sure that Jesus, if you were to slap him on one side, he will tell you about peace, he will turn his face.
Well, I don't remember that, but I probably did. I know that the first time we met, you came to the Pembroke Pines Police Department to talk to us about Islam and the Muslim culture. It was the first time that I really got a view, an inside view of it, and it's interesting that we talk about this. I, along with a lot of cops previously, a lot more today, a lot of maybe, I guess, European Americans, non-Muslim Americans, let me say, who really don't understand a lot about Islam and Muslims. You know, the interesting dynamic in this is that if you don't understand something, you tend to fear it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was when we first met. And I asked you some tough questions.
I know. That's what you would tell me. You said, you guys are not very peaceful, and if
Yes,
something was to happen,
I
you would want to attack us, and you're not forgiven. And
I did.
It was.
I did. I recall that, and you know, I said that if that your mission as a Muslim, that you have to kill the infidels,
Yes,
and I
yes,
brought up a bunch of stuff like that, and I spoke out of ignorance. And today, from you and I traveling across the United States and being friends and meeting a lot of people at Dar al-Uloom, I know that that's just not, that's petty and it's ignorant.
But that also proves, Sergeant, that Muslims are not doing what they're supposed to do. Don't you think that if Muslims in America or in the world, I mean, if the Arab world or the Muslim world will spend some more time and money in letting the rest of the world know a little more of Islam, as opposed to hearing only this sort of negative thing about Gaddafi and Bin Laden and Saddam Hussein Islam, if they would have heard more about the true Islam, like Christians have done about Jesus, peace be upon him, I think a lot of these doubts would have been removed from the minds of people. What do you think about that?
Listen, sir, I can't agree with you more on that. I think you hit the nail right on the head. On that topic a little bit is the issue that a lot of people, a lot of non-Muslims are they become upset that Muslims around the world and specifically in this community, some of them don't speak out against the atrocities of an evil man like Bin Laden. So I think a lot of non-Muslims really want to hear the Muslim community in their Muslim neighbors. We all have a neighbor now who is Muslim. And they want to hear them say, listen, we don't believe in this. This guy, we're glad that that the world is rid of him. He was an evil man. So I think that's one aspect of it. The next aspect, I have my neighbors across the street from me are from Lebanon, Muslims from Lebanon. They're friends of mine.
Interesting.
They're Shia Muslim. Their kids come over to my house and play. My kids go over to their house and play. I'm friends with Mike, my neighbor.
Whoa. You know, I just want to cut you.
Sure.
You're probably a better Muslim here because there are Muslims who wouldn't be friends with a Shia.
Well,
anyhow, continue.
You know, and the Christians have that between the Protestants and the Catholics in Ireland still today.
Yes,
so
yes.
I mean, I guess that's the dynamics of Islam.
No, but it shows the tolerance. It shows your tolerance. I'm saying that there are Muslims who are Sunni Muslims and will not tolerate a Shia, which is wrong. Here you are a non-Muslim and you have a Shia as a friend.
I have a Sunni as a friend. I have a Shia as a friend.
Excellent.
Yes. On that point, you know, I encourage my friends who are non-Muslim, Christians, Jews, listen, you probably have a neighbor who you may or may not know is a Muslim. Talk to him. Talk to him. And on that note, what I'd like to say to the Muslims out there who are in the American communities and are neighbors, talk to your non-Muslim friends. And just explain to them when they ask you, hey, why do you people, don't be offended, why do you people fly planes into buildings? Why do you people bomb innocent kids? Why do you people shoot rockets from Gaza? Listen, understand that they deep down they know that it's not you people. They're just generalizing. And I think it would be huge for the Muslim community as neighbors to say, listen, let me explain to you what this is about, and answer questions, encourage questions, encourage people to ask, what about this? What does this mean? What does this mean? When I did that and you answered them, it opened up a lot of doors for me, and really opened my mind up.
I know, it was interesting. We became friends.
We became very good friends.
You started learning to read and write Arabic.
That's an interesting story that I use all the time, too.
Yeah, maybe you want to share that with our viewers. What encouraged you to start and learn to read and write Arabic?
I would like to.
From not even wanting to be the friend of a Muslim.
Yes, and all the way to where, well, you and I had talked, and we had talked about a interesting man who went to the Dar al-Ulum Mosque by the name of Jose Padilla.
Yes, yes.
Convicted terrorist, enemy of the United States, and you knew him, and you and I had some lengthy conversations about it.
And they also had me on Time Magazine as a teacher of the suspected terrorists.
Well, interesting that you say that, because I confronted you about that. And actually, I didn't know that. And you told me, I'll throw one further to you. I taught Jose Padilla how to read and write Arabic.
Yes.
And I said, teach me. And you guaranteed me that you would teach me how to read and write in 8 lessons. And I think you taught a dumb guy like me, just a dumb cop. I think it was 6 lessons, and I was doing pretty good. Today I can read and write it. I can't understand it very well, but I can read and write it thanks to you. But that was interesting, and you know, I tell people, and obviously you had no idea, Jose, the intentions of Jose Padilla at the time. There was no way you could have. But I tell people, you know, it's interesting that I learned, the anti-terrorism cop learned how to read and write Arabic from the same man who taught a guy who turned out to be a bad guy.
Interesting. That's how unique things could be in the world. It's all about education. You know, I remember when his picture came up on television, I was like, this guy face looked familiar. I had no clue of his history. What has happened to him, where he went, and it looked so familiar. And then I started going back into my archives, and very strange, the name was different. I don't remember what I knew him as. And that's how I started going back and said, but this is the guy that used to come here. So I had no clue of his life, his agenda, where he went, and whatever happened.
Well, you know, in going back with Jose Padilla, and I remember asking you bluntly, and I think you and I had developed that relationship where, and even today I can ask you straight up and anything. And I asked you, you know, sir, Maulana, how could this man come into your mosque and come into your office and you teach him and you have no idea? Please explain that to me. And it's interesting, and I use this story when I teach cops literally around the world. I'm a Catholic. I was born and raised Catholic. And you said to me, if you're in church one day and a man comes in, just some man comes in and sits in the back pew of the church for the services, would you say anything? And I said, well, no, I guess I wouldn't. And you said, would the priest stop and say, whoa, time out. Who is this guy? We don't know this guy. You're going to have to leave. And I said, no, of course he wouldn't. And you explained that, well, it's the same way in a masjid. In a mosque, that's, you know, people are welcome. Anybody is welcome to come in. And I thought it was very interesting because, again, I had my preconceptions. And when you explained that, I said, wow, you know what? That really makes sense. I get it now. Now I get it.
Nobody has no clue. I mean, the church door, the mosque is open for everybody. Come and pray. You don't know who got good intentions or bad intentions. And, you know, let's be very, very realistic about it. One of the best examples among the examples of prophets was Jesus, peace be upon him. Who betrayed him?
Judas.
His closest friend.
Yes.
One from amongst him. So nobody knows who could be in an audience and what is his or her agenda.
Yes.
And therefore, of course, the entire Muslim world or the Muslim leaders cannot be blamed for elements who turn out to be bad, who come with bad intention. But as you rightly said, we need to speak out against it. And that's what a program like this does and could do for the world. And when we get back, we got to go on a short break, Sergeant.
Okay.
But I think it's interesting. You know, a program like this and a person like you on this program is very, very helpful. Because if among our viewers worldwide, and from our viewers, we got people who like Muslims, who like non-Muslims, those who don't like Muslims, and those who don't like non-Muslims. Let's be real. You hear those kind of concepts.
Of course.
And if one Muslim benefits to understand that he should not think anti-America, anti-Americans, anti-non-Muslims, and one Muslim could change his concept about his neighbors and life and his characteristics in the world, we have done something.
I agree.
If one non-Muslim could better understand Muslims and better understand Islam and change his impression about all Muslims because of one bad Muslim, we have accomplished mission. And all thanks to God to have you with us. So when we get back, viewers, on this program, Interfaith Views and Issues, we'll continue this conversation with Sergeant Jim Gort, a prominent person of South Florida community, well known throughout the United States and international on his work and experience in the field of anti-terrorism law enforcement activities. Thank you.
Subhanallah.
Tune in to Who's Who in America and in your community, hosted by Sister Naima Khan Ghani, with extraordinary guests every Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. on www.alhikmatlive.com.
Walla ilaha illallah. Walla ilaha illallah. Wallahu akbar. Wallahu akbar.
Tune in for Friday Khutbah at 1:30 p.m. broadcasting live from Darul Uloom Institute, Pembroke Pines, Florida, on Al Hikmah TV Online.
Jashne Ahmad-e Rasool. Allahi Allah.
Tune in to Young Muslim Talent in America, hosted by Salma Muhammad, with talented kids from all over America, every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. on www.alhikmatlive.com.
Allahi Allah. Oh, Jashne Ahmad-e Rasool. Allahi Allah.
Thinking of doing Sadaqah Jariyah for your near and dear ones? We recommend you to sponsor the Origin of True Islam brochure, the Genealogy of Prophets, or the surahs and zikr to be recited daily as Sadaqah Jariyah for your parents who have passed away. Or you could sponsor one of the items for yourself, fi sabilillah. For more details, contact the Al Hikmat office at 1-800-804-0267 or 954-986-0158, or email us at alhikmat@alhikmat.com.
Welcome back to Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths and cultures. I'm your host, Shafayat Mohammed, and with me in the studio today is Sergeant Jim Gort, a very good friend and a very, very, very well-experienced man in the field of law enforcement in Pembroke Pines, South Florida, throughout the USA and throughout the world. He has traveled to Israel, to South Africa, and many different countries in that profession of law enforcement. So welcome back, Sergeant. It's a pleasure again to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
Good, good. So may I ask you, for the benefit of our viewers, would you like to share some advice to our viewers throughout the world on what Muslims should do so that non-Muslims, or maybe law enforcement officers, Americans, especially right now, seeing that that is your profession, you're an American, you're in law enforcement, you've worked with the FBI, you've been all over teaching about anti-terrorism, etc. What advice can you give to the community worldwide about what is expected from Muslims that can remove some of these doubts in the minds of law enforcement officers, immigration officers at the airport,
Oh, sure.
Americans, etc.?
Well, look, the first thing is America is a multicultural, it's a melting pot. We're known as the melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
However, Muslims are a minority. There's not a lot here. So you have to understand that there are preconceptions. and that's going to go with anybody, with the hijab, you know, and they see a Muslim walking through the airport or through the mall or somewhere, you're going to have some people who don't understand, who have never met and sat down and talked with a Muslim, and they're going to have these preconceptions. You know, I guess it would be similar to the civil rights era in the United States, when an African American would walk down and people would have the preconceptions about them.
Right.
So my suggestion, as far as getting Americans specifically to understand the culture, is so simple. Talk to them. Understand that they may ask questions like I asked you. Understand that, and please don't be upset. If somebody comes to you, your neighbor or a coworker, says, "Listen, I got to ask you something. I saw on a TV show that all Muslims who adhere to the Quran, the Holy Quran, that they have to kill non-Muslims. It's their job, and they have to spread Sharia, and they have to you have to take out the infidel, and that we're going to spread Islam all over the world and either force people to become Muslims, or we have to kill them. That's the only way." Accept that question and smile and say, that's not the case. That's just not the case. And I really think that there's going to be a few. Let's be honest. There's going to be a few that are just going to block it out, and they're going to believe what they want to believe. But try, because the vast majority, 9 out of 10 of them, are going to be like me, and they're going to say, you know what? Muslim Americans are hardworking people who go to work, go to masjid, and they have their families, and they want their kids to be good kids and get good grades and go to college, and they're just like me, and they're just like everybody else. So the best thing I could say, the best advice I have, is talk to them. Accept the questions. Don't get mad. Smile and laugh to yourself and say, look, I get it. You saw the movie or watched a television show or read a book. Here's the real thing. I'm a real Muslim. Here's the real thing.
Excellent.
Now, dealing with law enforcement.
Because, you know, coming to that, a lot of Muslims are just scared to even talk to law enforcement. Soon as they see a Muslim, soon as a Muslim sees a police officer, they have the impression, oh my God, that police officer doesn't like me because I'm a Muslim, because I got a beard, because I got a hijab, because I am a Muslim, they don't like me. Is that really true, or what do you think?
Yeah. You know what? I think that you definitely do have that. Now, I think in the bigger metropolitan areas where you interact, you know, most people interact with Muslims on a daily basis. You don't see that as much because those law enforcement officials are. They deal with it on a regular basis, and they got to know the Muslim community, and they understand. But you're certainly going to have law enforcement who looks at that and, you know, is like, you know, what's up with this guy? What's up with this girl? What's going on here? I guess the best piece of advice that I can give if you do deal with law enforcement in that aspect is to be polite. And honestly, it sounds silly, but that goes for anybody, not just Muslims, but you know, police officers. You got to understand, if I pull a car over, you know who I am. I don't know who you are. So when I pull a car over at night, it could be a guy who just robbed a bank or shot his girlfriend, or it could be a hardworking, everyday guy who just happened to run a red light. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you. What passes through the mind of, I mean, let's be very blunt here, okay? For better understanding of people who are viewing this program in the Caribbean, all over the world. A white American police officer or sergeant or whatever pulls a guy over, boom, his name, Muslim, she is Muslim. What passes through his mind and what he really expects, or what answers he should get to not have the wrong impression about this Muslim guy, and why should this Muslim guy not think that he is against him because he's a Muslim? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, it's a tough question. I really don't have a good answer. I don't. I mean, I think that you're going to certainly have law enforcement like anyone else have those preconceptions about a Muslim. And I mean, let's be honest, there are police out there who may pull over a Muslim, a beard, or a girl in a hijab, excuse me, and think, you know, hey, is there a bomb in the back? I mean,
let's be real. Let's be real.
The real aspect is that there are certainly law enforcement and anybody else who, you know, Joe Blow at the mall may see you walking. Is there a bomb in your coat? And it's sad that people think like that. And a lot of it is ignorance, and it goes all the way back to talk.
And he's only doing his job because he needs to take the necessary precautions.
Going back to that, yes, absolutely. It's hard if you feel that an officer's looking at you and thinking that just because I have a beard and I have a Muslim name, that, you know, this guy thinks that I have a bomb in the trunk, and that's the attitude that I'm getting from him. Understand this: we give a lot of people attitudes because it's an officer safety issue.
Excellent.
Every week, I get 2 or 3 alerts of officers being killed in the United States. Probably at least 2 a week get killed. Cops in the United States get killed from people with guns or accidents or knives or assaults. And I don't know how many of them are Muslim. Probably a very, very small percentage. But understand, when we go out with somebody, and when I say that, I mean we go to a call and you're there, we stop a car and you're there, we respond to your house and you're there. The attitude, the perception of the attitude is more realistically an officer safety issue, where I want to make sure that I'm safe, because you know who I am in uniform. I don't know who you are.
And that's the point, and that's why I understand the 9 yards. The officer got to take precautions because that's his job, and that's what I was saying. What do you suggest that Muslim guy, and we just zoom in on Muslim and Islam because of that, what should he do and what should he not do that would create a better understanding into the mind of the officer? Because I know for sure if he gets up and says, oh yeah, my name is Muhammad, so you're going to treat me bad, that's going to irritate the officer even more.
Yes.
So what should he not do? And how should he talk to the officer? What should he say that will help better the situation? What sort of things you recommend that he should say or whatever?
Okay. In short, anytime myself or one of my guys go to a scene, they're going to take control of the scene. It's command presence, and I want to make sure that I have control of the scene and you don't. And it's nothing to do with, and this is with anybody.
Yes.
So I understand from dealing with the Muslim community and dealing with people from North Africa through the Arabian Peninsula to through Asia, through Pakistan, India, and the Philippines, dealing with people from each one of those cultures. What I found is an interesting dynamic, that a lot of those cultures are, if they go to the police in those countries, they may not come home, and there's that ingrained, and it's a truth. In some of those cultures, if the police grab you, they throw you in the back seat, or they may beat you up on the street. So I know a lot of cultures feel that way, and they're automatically intimidated by the police. America is not like that. Please don't be. But I understand that when the police deal with you, it may be feel a little overwhelming, and understand that it feels overwhelming for everybody, not just Muslims or non-Muslims.
Because that's his job.
That's our job. So once a cop comes on scene, even if he or she's a little gruff, seems a little aggressive, do what they ask. If they say, hey, I need you to stand over here, let me see your hands, it doesn't mean that they think that you have a bomb.
And because you're Muslim.
Hands are the only things that can kill you.
Yes.
Think about that. So if I can see your hands and I can control your hands, you can't kill me. Hands have a gun, hands have a knife, hands have whatever, a broken beer bottle. So as long as I know where your hands are and I can control your hands, now I'm a little bit more in control of the scene. So if I come on scene and I say, hey, I need to see your hands, show me your hands. If I need ID. Now I know in some of the more strict Muslim cultures, dealing with women is an issue. Other men coming in, and I'm the whitest cop out there. I mean, look at me.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit more about the Muslim culture. So when I go on scene, I'm a little bit more educated about dealing with Muslim women. but you're not going to have very many cops out there who are. So please understand that if a cop comes and he needs to take the woman and talk to her, and it may be really hard for a Muslim man who's maybe a little more devout, a little more strict in the culture, to say, I'm going to allow this white cop to take my wife and talk to her alone in another room. You know, I would have another female officer come there and deal with that situation, but a lot of times you're just not going to have that.
Because time, emergency situation is very important. Yeah.
Yes. But understand that it isn't a disrespect thing. It's more of an issue where we need to do this right away.
Yes.
We need to make sure that the scene is safe, or it's just complete ignorance. And when I say ignorance, I mean that in a gentle way, a nice way. The officers probably just don't understand. This isn't, for white cops like me, this isn't our culture. I've come to you and you've taught me a lot of it. I've gone to classes. I've gone to the Middle East, Palestine, Israel. I've been to Africa. So I understand the culture a little bit better, but not all cops will.
Yes.
And it's not a disrespectful thing in any way. And my advice is don't take it as disrespect. Be tolerant enough to understand that it's a police procedural thing.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because, you know, every day you hear of Muslims say, you know, they did it to me because I'm a Muslim. And I'm really, really happy that you explained that. You know what was passing through my mind when you were saying that when a cop pulls someone over, he got to take the 9 yards, precaution, and they must not think that they are really a culprit or they got a bomb. He just got to do what he has to do. It reminds me of me preaching on a pulpit. When I speak about righteousness and good, I mean, it doesn't mean that everybody in the audience are bad. It doesn't mean when a preacher, any preacher, when you preach from the pulpit about doing good and don't do wrong and don't drink alcohol or don't kill, or, it doesn't mean that everybody in the audience do that and you're telling everybody that you are murderers and you don't pray and you don't give charity. There are those who do it and there are those who don't do it. So, but I got to speak, or the preacher got to speak generally to the audience about what is good and what is bad. And I think that's exactly what happened with the officer. The officer got to do what he has to do. And especially in the case of emergency and officers, you got to take the precaution. And that's what Muslims really need to know. Because I don't know, Sergeant, if it's getting better or it's getting worse. Because I'm seeing all over America, Muslim organizations, everybody is putting up all these flags. They're always about, you know, anti-law enforcement and anti-law officers, and this one did that. And so instead of educating the Muslim community in how to deal with law enforcement officers, what I see happening in some cases is a lot of Muslims and Muslim leaders, sorry to say that, they scare the community even more by saying, oh, they're going to do this to you and they came to do this to you and they did it to you because you're a Muslim. And that's what I like of your presence in this show. I need it. Your presence and your remarks will clarify that kind of, sometimes I'm sorry to say the word, ignorance, as you rightly said.
You know, you bring up actually a very good point, and I know that there are some Muslim organizations, some kind of civil rights type organizations, who file lawsuits and complaints against police. Now, let me preface this by saying that I don't know how many are there may be a lot of validity to some of them. Let me say this, that if you truly feel that you were treated unfairly by the police, or they disrespected you or were rude in any way, there's a procedure at the police department where you can go in and lodge a complaint, and I guarantee you every single police department in this United States takes those complaints very seriously. We do, very seriously, and we look at each and every one of them. But I think that you have a very valid point that some of these organizations, some of the times, at least from my perspective, and maybe from a law enforcement perspective, take it over the top. And now you have the community, the Muslim community, in this instance, looking kind of sideways at the cops, and the cops looking back sideways at the Muslim community, and where we were possibly making some headway, now we're kind of dividing them again, because it turns into a he said, she said type thing, instead of us coming together and talking. Now, a lot of times going to the police department and us reviewing it, it would be a good opportunity for us to maybe pull the officer to the side, explain to if it was an issue with a Muslim citizen or local resident, you know, saying, hey, I felt that I was disrespected in this manner. Now, maybe I could come out and say, okay, listen, here's what happened, understand this, apologize that you felt this way, but there may be a few different reasons why. And then I could call the cop in and say, listen, here's the deal. This is the culture that's here within this Muslim community. We need to understand some of the dynamics of that culture. And now we're bringing them together instead of separating them.
Yeah, I think it's time now that we get rid of this misconception about religion being part of this situation. You know, I mean, you got everybody. You got Muslims, Christians, Jews, believers, non-believers. They're all on different cases. They go to the clubs, they go here, they got the same kind of technicalities and situations in their life. And you know, I really think that I mean, I know a lot of education has been going on, but I think there is need for more.
I agree. And you know, it's not even, we're talking, if you take religion out of the picture, which I'm not sure that religion really is the dynamic that we should be dealing with. It's the culture. I mean, you're from the islands, the Caribbean.
Yes, from Trinidad, yeah.
And you may have somebody from Syria or somebody from Pakistan or somebody or down in South Florida. We have a strong Haitian community, Cuban community, Venezuelan community, Russian community. I think in all my travels, South Florida has the most diverse community of anywhere I've ever traveled to. So it's not just the Muslim culture. We could deal with the Haitians, and the Haitians have as an example, Haitians have their own unique culture, and we may inadvertently offend the Haitians by doing A, B, or C, as we would inadvertently offend a Muslim household by maybe asking the wife or the daughter to go into another room so that we could talk to them about why we were called there. So I think that education, going back to your education point, I think that's a key.
Yeah, because a Haitian might think it's because of race.
Yes.
A Muslim might think it's because of religion, when it has nothing to do with that.
Right. Exactly. And you know, and going back to when you and I went to Phoenix to train the police officers in Phoenix.
Maybe you should share some of your experience with that anti-terrorism thing. Yeah.
Okay. You have done several classes. I've taught several classes of law enforcement officers and first responders on anti-terrorism, anti-terrorism aspects, the historical aspect and investigations. And what I like to do is bring you in to speak to them from a Muslim perspective. And every class that I've done, and I tell them, listen, we're going to have a community leader, a well-respected man of the community, a sheikh, and they're, you know, it's treated with trepidation that, oh my God, one of them is going to come in here and we got to listen to this and, you know, what's going to happen. And without exception, after every class on the reviews, it was, what an eye-opener. Because, and I think one of the things, to your credit, Maulana, is that you take any question out there and you take some tough questions where I'm sitting in the back of the room going, woo. But you know what? I think that's important, that you don't, when the cops ask really silly questions, you don't get offended by it and you say, okay, I understand. And I remember one question was about a police officer asking about, well, the Quran says that Jews are sons of monkeys and pigs. And he said, so I'm a Jew, which one would you say I am, sir? And you said that's not what the Quran says. And you listed off the exact surah of what he was talking about, and you explained to him exactly what it said. And you know, after this guy says, wow, boy, people really take this out of context, because he went and looked it up, and it's exactly what you said it was.
I think that was in Phoenix, was that?
That was in Phoenix, yes.
Phoenix, yeah.
So, you know, it's a good dynamic to bring you in when, you know, people, I teach an anti-terrorism class, and I think a lot of cops and first responders think, oh, well, he's going to teach us how to catch the Muslims. And that's not what it is. And that's why I really like when you come in and you spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours, however long you spend, and you talk about really the parallels between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And there's some strong parallels. But you open up a lot of eyes, and I think we need more of that. I would really like to see more of that all over.
Yeah, maybe we need to get and encourage people in different states to do more of that, because that is a serious situation. Law enforcement, Muslims, and people really, really need. I mean, America has sort of gotten over that hill to a, I mean, yeah, we're now having President Obama being a president of America. I mean, let's be very honest. So a lot of the African Americans now, they don't have that complex that, well, an African American cannot reach to the top in America. And I think that's the syndrome. I mean, let's be very real. Exactly that example you were using with Haiti. That's the sort of little syndrome that a lot of people are having. They think that they mix law enforcement with education and race and religion, and that has been corrupting their minds.
Sure. Yes. I mean, I agree. I can't even add anything to that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean, but it can all be done by education.
Yes. Yeah.
Both sides need to be educated on the issue.
And you know, it doesn't have to be a man of your stature, a community leader. It doesn't have to be a cop. It really goes back to what I said. Me talking to my neighbor Mike, who's a Shia Muslim, and just talking to him. He's a guy who lives next door to me, just like my neighbor next to me.
And you're not afraid of him, right?
No.
You don't think he wants to kill you?
No.
You don't think he has a bomb?
No. Of course not. No, he's a good, hardworking man. I mean, he owns his own business. His kids come over to my house and go swimming all the time. My kids are over his house, probably driving his wife nuts more than they're over at my house. And it's no different than my kids going to the other neighbor's house. We're all Americans trying to get along. He happens to be a Muslim, but we're all Americans.
Excellent. And maybe that's what we need. You know, I think we have a lot of talk. In the world today, in America, a lot of dialogue, a lot of interfaith talk, a lot of these organizational seminars. But until people don't start to live like that, like you and your neighbor, and communicate like that, and it's good. I mean, a sergeant to be having your family, good relationship with your Shia Muslim over the road, that's a good example. That's a living example.
Yes.
I mean, that speaks volumes.
Yes, it does. And if we could just get more people, more non-Muslims to go over and talk to their Muslim neighbors to talk to their non-Muslim, and encourage them to ask me anything. You know, there's a lot of preconceptions, a lot of misinformation about Islam and Muslims. And maybe the Muslims have a lot of preconceptions and misinformation about what Americans really think. You know, 99% of Americans, they, just like I said, they want to go to work and have a nice house, be able to pay their mortgage, feed their kids, and send them to college. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Well, you know, you did a job not only as a sergeant, but you did a little religious preaching. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because in Islam, we were taught by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and in the Quran, to treat your neighbors nice, to live good with your neighbors. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us that your neighbor should be safe from your tongue, from your hands, from all your actions, that they should always feel safe. And for your neighbor to feel safe, you need to talk to them. You need to be nice to them. And Muslims should not wait for a non-Muslim to make the effort to try to be nice to the Muslim. The Muslim should practice his religion in being nice to his neighbor. So that solves the religious problem, and it also solves the law of the land.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, and also I know there's some cultural differences between the Muslim culture and the white Christian or white Jewish culture, maybe even some of the Haitian and Cuban and Spanish religious cultures. But you know, if we all make a little bit of effort to get along and talk to each other and respect the other culture, and even maybe take an extra step to, I don't know if assimilate is the right word, but understand that we're in a melting pot here. You know, we're not in the Middle East where it's one culture. We're not in Ireland where it's predominantly Catholic, and we're not in Israel where it's predominantly Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a little bit of everything here.
Yes.
This is like a stew, you know, a big pot of stew where we have a little bit of everything. And if we try to understand and say, listen, it's not just my way or the highway. Let's understand and give a little bit and be polite. If people were more polite, we would cut crime in half, just from politeness.
You're right. You're so right. And it's so sad, Sergeant, to know that people go to school together for a degree. They work together in a working environment, Christian, Jews, Muslims, everyone, for money, for a job. They travel together. But when it comes to understanding your culture, we live like enemies. Can you imagine that?
Well, it's true.
Does
It's
it
true.
mean that we only interact because it has monetary gains, but when it comes to real life and love and living, we hate each other? That's bad, and that's where education comes in.
Yes.
It's not that we don't unite. I mean, I use the example of, I mean, look at Palestinians and Jews. They live together in America. They fight across there, and they
Yes.
live together here.
Yes.
They don't want to see each other there. When they're here, they eat and drink and do business together.
You know, and it's funny in my past job. I don't do the anti-terrorism stuff anymore, but in my past job, I dealt with several Palestinian men, and I had frank conversations with them. So, you know, why is it that you hate the Jews? And he's like, I don't hate the Jews. That's over there. Over here, I have Jewish friends. My neighbor's Jewish, and we hang out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like that you know these guys have said, listen, I don't know, I can't control what goes on over here, but now let's just get along. And I think that if we all just said, let's just take a step back, let's not have preconceptions and give it a chance. And you know what? Hey, I'm lucky that he's not, but my neighbor could have been a real jerk and I didn't like him.
Yeah.
You know, I have a neighbor who I don't talk to because he's not a nice guy, he's not a polite guy. As it turns out, Mike is a really nice guy.
And he's Muslim.
And but you know what I look at it is, he's my neighbor. He happens to be Muslim, but he's my neighbor. And I hope that he looks at me as, hey, Jim he's a nice guy. You know, he's nice to my kids and we hang out, and he happens to be Christian. So what? So what?
Yeah. Well, Sergeant, it was really, really a pleasure to have you with us on Al Hikmah TV on this program, Interfaith Views and Issues, you know, to share your views and multicultural ideas and your experience in law enforcement and whatever, anti-terrorism, etc. It's really, really a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm sure viewers throughout the world would really be happy after viewing this program. Do you have anything to share with us for a second or two as we conclude?
No, I would just say I appreciate you asking me to be here out of friendship and to be able to talk to the greater community. And I understand that your audience is mostly Muslim, and you said that there's also non-Muslims
Yes.
in there. And I hope that you and I have an interesting dynamic, that when we talk to people, you know, I think we open up a lot of people. We're able to get through to a lot of people, and I hope that we were able to do that today.
Yes, you did. You did that for sure. And I hope
Thank you.
that we would be blessed for this, because you know what? Education, in Arabic we say al-ilmun nurun. Knowledge is light. And by us discussing this issue of education, that's a light. It will be a brightness and an opening so people can live a better life, be a happier people in this world and wherever they live in the world, inshallah, God willing. Thank you very much again. And listeners, viewers, it has been a pleasure and an honor to have Sergeant Jim Gort with us. He is a sergeant at the Pembroke Pines Police Department in South Florida. Thank you very much for viewing this program, Interfaith Views and Issues. I'm your host, Shafayat Mohammed, wishing you all the best until next program, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Hmm.